Hey, Happening Hostages, Rivtal here with our 7th landmark video for AoE4 by Numbers, this time looking at the Mongols. Starting off in Feudal Age, right, you've got the Silver Tree and the Deer Stones. The Silver Tree is pretty straightforward, right? It's a market, so that's got a value. It's a market that produces 40% faster, so the initial market value times 1.4 gives you about 158 resources. And then if you continuously produce out of it with the 40% gold discount to your traders, it's about 24 gold a trader and gets you 69 resources per minute. That's a little high considering what it gives you up front, right? That should come down from 40% gold discount to 35% gold discount to hit closer to the target. But overall, not crazy out of spec. The issue I have with Silver Tree, as far as its balance, is generally an issue for Mongols with the market, and that's the double production, right? If we look at the Mongol villagers, most Mongol units, in order to double produce, if a unit costs 120 resources, you have to spend that 120 plus another 120 stone to double produce. The exception is the villager. The villager requires, instead of 50 stone, 125, right? So you're paying a 2.5x premium for that second villager in stone over traditional cost. Why was this done? This was done for balance, simply because it's an economic unit. It has an ability to generate more resources itself and to prevent runaway. If we go over to the market, however, a standard trader costs 120 resources. You would think that then the stone cost to double produce should be 2.5 times, right? Another 300 resources. The same factoring as the villager because it's an economic unit and it can scale you. But it doesn't. It only costs 120 stone to double produce like any other unit. And this, more than anything, is the problem with the Silver Tree and with Mongol markets. It's again an example of a conflict in the game. If it's true that double production has to cost more in order to balance for an economic unit, okay, then apply it to these economic units over here. If it's not true, which I think it is, but if it's not, I think maybe 2.5 times a bit too much. You could probably just go with double. But if it's not true, well then bring the cost down on the villagers. Which of course I think they won't do, because if you could double produce the villagers at that rate, you would come into feudal age with with a very nice economic lead, and they know that, but have never seen fit to do anything about the market. And that's why of all the civs that can trade, Mongols is the most annoying, because it just feels like you're killing traders left and right and they still have more. So not a critique of the Silver Tree. As I said, should have the gold discount adjusted slightly, but overall, well in a normal range, balanced landmark. Just fix the double production, please. The Deer Stones is a little harder to put something on, so it gives you the YAM network tech. That tech is 350 resources. Obviously, that's only about half what we're expecting to get from an upfront landmark, so where's the rest of its value coming from? Well, normally the YAM network functions around towers. The Deer Stones itself is generating that aura, so you could argue it's got the value of a tower that it's saving you, right? And it's a mobile tower, which you could argue is a little more, but for now, let's just go with the tower, right? Takes us to 490. Where are we going to get our other 200 resources? The other thing it gives you, which is difficult, again, to put a number on, is access to the Khan's Hunter. It's a 120 resource unit that adds range to ranged units nearby it. On the surface, that may not sound like it's got a lot of value, but if we look at the Imperial Age tech of Silk Bowstrings that adds 1.5 tile range to archers, that's 1,000 resource technology only available in Imperial. So the Khan's Hunter has got to be carrying, or access to it's got to be carrying, a fair amount of value to bring this landmark up to where it needs to be. So I would say at minimum, this landmark is probably fairly priced, though it's difficult to put exact numbers on. However, you're only going to get that value if you are using archers. That means you've got to go either a 1-1-1 comp or a comp with archers. If you're going Deerstones into Spear Keshik, you are throwing away this part of the bonus and not getting what you're supposed to out of the deer stones. You've got to have some kind of ranged unit on the field with cons hunters accompanying them to take advantage of that bonus because, as we said, it's got to be making up about 200 resources, right? Almost a third of this landmark's value is in the access to this, and so you need to make sure you're using it or you're not getting everything out of the deer stones that you could. And I would hazard to say that that may be one of the reasons people have felt that Mongol was kind of on the weaker side lately, is not understanding how much weight this was carrying. That's it for feudal landmarks. For the Castle Age, we again have one that's a little hard to put numbers on, but we'll start with the easier one, the step readout, right? It's just a gur, so 113 resource value up front, and then 50% bonus in the gold drop off. Villagers mine about 40 resources a minute, so for each villager, it could generate 20 gold per minute. What's that mean relative to the 300 resource a minute standard for a castle landmark? It means that if you don't have at least 15 villagers at that step readout gathering gold, you are not keeping up with your opponent's landmarks. This is important primarily because many civs, due to the heavy cavalry emphasis in the game currently, have trended towards sooner and sooner castle ages, and Mongol is often castling, or having to castle because their opponent did, at a stage where they cannot get 15, like you simply can't justify. It's too much of your economy to have 15 villagers on the gold. There's not enough to spend it on. And so I think because of that, Mongol is a little bit griefing themselves in that regard, and given Mongol's ability to put out aggression against most any civ out there and attack and deny their gold, Mongol is one that is well placed to force their opponents to stay with them in feudal and drag it out until they're sure they're going to be able to get their money's worth out of the step readout. Now, the Kurultai is a very large Y factor. We could attempt to look at the Abbey of Kings, right, and its healing and how much value was left after you got the king up front and do some kind of factoring. The problem is that the Abbey only works while out of combat, whereas the Kurultai works in it. So it's not just a one-to-one mathematical split between the two, right? I can't just take and convert because the in-combat healing, while slower than the Abbey's out-of-combat healing, can be incredibly valuable. If you've ever tried to kill a batch of archers under the Kurultai with a mangonel, you know that it can feel almost impossible because as soon as you or as soon as you finish reloading, most of that damage is healed. So we've really got to leave this as a Y factor. All I'll say about it though is that, like the step readout, it benefits if you can keep a long feudal going, in that the more units you could fit around the Kurultai in that big battle that that it's going to support, the better value you're getting from it. And if you're going into this, kind of match the opponent's fast castle with some raiding, you're not going to have the army to really benefit from the Kurultai. Just like on the step readout, you're going to have enough economy to justify the 15 villagers on gold. So both of these push for a strategic and intelligent timing for Castle Age, right? If you're going to go Kurultai, you want to do it when you've got a good mass and you're ready to back up, drop the Kurultai, get the upgrades, and take the game-winning fight. And for the step readout, you need to reach the economy level where you're going to have it pay off to collect that much gold. For Imperial Age landmarks, you've got the White Stupa and the Khaganate Palace. The White Stupa is an Uvu, right? So that's 160 resources there, and it's able to generate 240 stone a minute. Now, that's not the number we're going to use, though, because what it also does is discounts all your stone purchases, all your double unit productions by 50%. So that 240 has really become more like 480, right? And 480, well, on the slower side, right? Even factoring the 160, right? The 160's got very little value when you think about the 3,000 we talk about up front for most Imperial Age landmarks. A permanent Uvu, especially with the way that pastures work around it, really does bring its value. I don't believe this landmark is really too low by any means, right? If we're about 480 from the stone, and we're saying 5 to 600 for most of these that we're seeing so far for Imperial landmarks, you've only got to make between 20 and 120 off of the value it's giving you, per minute, value it's bringing to your pastures, and I think that's probably fair to say. Now, for the Cognate Palace, it's just producing units. It's actually producing quite a bit. It's very much on the high end, where we've said, again, about 5 to 600 we see in most of these Imperial landmarks. It's producing, at minimum, 655 resources per minute. Now, a couple of the random generations are higher. The Palace Guards are 681, and the Megundai and Khan's Hunter are 752. So if you average all those out, you get in the 680, 685 range, and that is very strong compared to the other Imperial Age landmarks we've looked at, and why we see so many people kind of going for the fast Imperial to let this building really produce their armies in some respects. So obviously, I don't see how the White Stupa, whatever it's giving you for whatever benefit it's giving for the pastures, is ever going to catch up with this. And it's also pretty strong by any other landmark standards we've looked at. So I would say the Cognate Palace, and I think most people would not be surprised by this, needs a little bit of a tune down, though I do understand why they are hesitant to do that, since Mongols isn't exactly the world's best performing civ right now. They're probably looking at where else they can give it some benefits. At the same time, they tune that Cognate Palace down again, because I believe it's already been tuned down once. That's the Mongol landmarks, right? So one thing I guess I did not do here, I said in the past, if it's a defensive structure or an economic scaling building, we're going to add the hit point value to it, right? And the Silver Tree would be an economic scaling building. If we add those, the difference between that and a normal market, those few thousand hit points, it's going to blow the value through the roof, and clearly that's not being counted. So it's hard to say what the right answer is there, right? We've done it for town centers, we've done it for defensive structures, but we haven't done it for buildings like this is a much stronger Uvu. So maybe the Silver Tree is more like, some of these other economic buildings, that even though it can scale traders, this is the only way it works. That's our Mongol landmarks. Obviously, we saw Cognate Palace very strong. The rest of them, within kind of a normal range, though again, Kurultai, very difficult to put a value on. Mongols, not the best civ right now. I think in the definite, the meta of heavy cavalry, having a weaker heavy cav is not the place to be. So, again, with the way that their castle age landmarks work, and the fact that they've got those Keshiks were very good in feudal and not so good once other people get into their heavy cav, that really keeping your opponents in feudal, that traditional tower rush, that constant pressure is really where Mongols, what they have to do to survive at the moment, and maybe is just, that's their play style and the way they're always going to need to be. That's it. Let me know what you think in the comments. Join us on Discord, discuss and debate. I've got the updated spreadsheets posted there. And check me out on Twitch. I'm live most US evenings, 8 p.m. Eastern Time right now, 9 p.m. once we move the clocks forward, and hope to see you on the ladder.